Welcome, boys and girls. It's time to talk about mastering. Today I want to talk about getting your mixes loud. I want to introduce you to the different tools you can use to increase the loudness of your mix, limiters, clippers, multiband compression, and I want to show you the pros and cons. I want to show you what I use. I want to show you my go-to plugin combinations for loud but great sounding mixes. Time to get loud together. Here we go. One question that a lot of people ask is how loud should my mixes be? And it used to be as loud as possible, but things have changed. So here is a little disclaimer. Don't do anything to your mix that makes it sound worse just to make it louder. That makes no sense anymore, especially these days. Loudness used to be way more important 10 years, 20 years ago, especially at the beginning of the digital age, when the main medium was the CD. These days, the vast majority of people are listening to music through the streaming platforms, mostly Spotify or Apple Music or even YouTube, like here. And all those platforms have automatic loudness compensation. And I gotta say, it usually works really well. I've tried it here on YouTube to upload like the same thing with a different loudness, and it just gets compensated. That means if you make your mix louder, it's probably not going to sound louder to the end user because the platform will compensate that. In Spotify, this can be turned off, but I believe that 99% of the consumers will leave this turned on because it is very convenient. It's just the mixing engineers who turn this off. So it gets compensated anyway. So again, you should not do anything to your mix that makes it sound worse just to be louder than any other production. Just makes no sense anymore. It still makes sense for a medium like the CD, but the CD is pretty much dead anyway, right? On the other hand, I would say 95% of all metal mixes on Spotify are still highly compressed, highly limited. And I think this has to do with the fact that we're used to this kind of sound. So we are used to highly squashed or highly limited mixes, and that's what we want to hear. But once again, my recommendation is make a loud mix, but don't go and don't destroy anything. Don't go any further as soon as you notice, hey, I'm actually making things worse. Now let's talk about the different tools we have to increase our loudness. There's multiband compression, there's limiting, and there's clipping. And I want to introduce you to the pros and the cons of those different tools. I usually go for a combination in the end, but there are also a few smart plugins out there that do some kind of magic hocus pocus combination on their own. But why don't we start with listening to what a limiter can do to your mix and what a clipper can do to your mix? Let's jump right into Cubase and have a listen to this. So right here we got the mix of a wonderful band. I've just mixed their upcoming record. This isn't even released yet. I hope they're not going to sue me. They're called Fragments of Unbecoming, and they're one of the best like melodic Swedish death metal bands right now out there. And yeah, this is the song I'm working on. Great songs, and I think the singer Sam has one of the greatest voices in the death metal world. I really love his voice, and if you're into that old school Opeth, Mikael Åkerfeldt kind of singing, really nice. Check out Fragments of Unbecoming, link below. I also mixed their latest record, also really nice record. Check it out, they deserve it. Anyway, we're gonna use this for our little demonstration today. And I'm gonna use a plugin, this one here. This is Flatline 2. By my friend Ermin Hamidovic from Submission Audio. And this is the perfect plugin for this, not only because it sounds great, but also because it has different modes, so I can show you the differences pretty easily and clearly. Let's have a look at this. So we've got 3 different modes, and this is the limit mode. You can see it here. And we just have to pull down the threshold to get some limiting going. And I'm gonna go to something like 10 dB of gain reduction. One nice feature is that you can press this button and this will automatically compensate the increased loudness by lowering the output level. So things don't get louder when we change any of the parameters. Let's hit it. And that makes it so much easier to actually tell what's going on. Now, let's talk about limiters. Limiters, or good sounding limiters with a good algorithm and a good auto release function, they sound very transparent and they're not going to introduce a lot of audible distortion, which is great, especially for, I think, acoustic music. And that's where I use them a lot. On the other side, limiters have a tendency to soften the transients, especially, like to make the music just sound a little softer, which is typically not great for percussive, punchy music like metal or any electronic music. And you will hear the difference when we switch to a clipping mode, which is very different. So you can just do that right here. Go from clipping to limiting in that plugin, which is so handy. And clipping is a way more brutal way of chopping off the peaks of your audio material. And clipping will typically introduce a lot more distortion, especially in the low end, on ringing guitars, on bass guitars, on toms, on kick drums. But it will preserve the transients of your material a lot better. Now, clipping became really hip something like 20 years ago when people realized that when they just clip their converters, especially the highly expensive Lavery Gold converters, on the way back, like from their analog mastering chain back into the DAW, it actually increased the loudness without a lot of the drawbacks of a classic limiter. But these days we do this in the box, and there are a lot of hard clipping plugins out there. So you see here we've got the limiter track, and here I've prepared another track, and this one, we need to change this still, also has 10 dB of gain reduction, but this time we're using the clipping mode, both with 4 times oversampling, and you will hear the difference right away. Let's start with limiting. And you can tell the snare is pretty much gone. Listen to how the snare comes back when I switch to clipping. Huge difference, and it clearly explains like one of the disadvantages of limiters. So outside of the distortion that clippers introduce, and I will show you that in a second, clippers usually, for me, also sound a little more stable and thicker in the low end. That's a little thinner. But the main difference is that all the punch, the snare punch and the kick punch just gets like softened out and goes into the back with the limiter. Now, I always recommend to mix into those tools and then switch them off, render the song, and then revisit this in the final mastering. Because if you mix into a limiter, then you just have to maybe push the snare a little more or crank the attack a little more or do something and mix into that tool. If you just slap a limiter on your master bus, in the end, after mixing, you're probably going to end up with a very weak snare, like we hear it here. And now you might say, perfect, why don't we just use a clipper? Because it really preserves all the punch of our snare. Yeah, you've guessed it. There are other disadvantages. For example, right here, can you hear the slight distortion? There's this, I call it death magnetic sizzle already on the guitar, some kind of here and there. And the limited version sounds very clean. And it gets even more extreme once you listen to toms. Just listen to this tom break and how distorted the toms sound. A lot of crackle. Some people are willing to accept that on their masters. I don't. If we go to the limited version, it sounds so clean. Nice toms. Clipper. Total distortion. And now your question is, isn't there something in between, best of both worlds? And the answer is yes. I think most of the modern mastering limiters actually have some kind of clipping and limiting combination, but I can show you the same thing right here within Flatline 2. There's a third mode that I use a lot lately. I really like this plugin, and this is the hybrid mode, which somehow magically combines limiting and clipping for a best of both worlds result. Let's just have a listen. The punch is there, just like in the clipped version. Or at least very close to that. At least it's very close. I also like how the low end sounds. And if we listen to the crackle we heard before, let's go to the tom break in the hybrid version. It sounds clean. I can't hear any distortion there right now. So this is a very nice combination of the, let's call it, transparency of a limiter with the punch of a clipper. Now, the plugin has a whole bunch of parameters, and I gotta say, they make no difference to me. It has a color knob. I don't hear any real difference. And there's an envelope with attack and release. I just never touch it because it makes no difference to me. I don't know, maybe I'm working with the wrong material or something, I don't know. Makes no difference to me. And I don't touch the look ahead either. I'm just using the default settings. The only thing I change here is the channel linking, which is set to 0, and I usually go to something like 20 or 30% for both attack and sustain. But I just leave the rest untouched. Go for a 4 times oversampling or even higher. I was never a big fan of 100% straight hard clipping, so I always used a combination of tools to get what I wanted. And this plugin will give you great results right out of the box. And it's also fantastic, as you've just heard, for explaining the difference between limiting and clipping. Now let's go to my go-to plugin chain that I use pretty much all the time. And that is a combination of multiband compression, which introduces the third category of loudness increasing tools, or let's call them density increasing tools, together with a limiter. Here I'm using MD3 from TC Electronic, which is basically a modern version of the classic TC finalizer. And I'm using that because I'm actually using, on most of my mixes, I'm actually still using the hardware version of the finalizer for this because I got it. But this plugin is actually even a better sounding version. So check out this plugin. It's really, really cool and very often overlooked. It's the MD3 from TC Electronic. And it is followed by Flatline. But in this case, you can see I only need 4 dB of gain reduction on the Flatline to get the same results. And this usually makes it sound a little more relaxed even because, each of those processes doesn't have to do a lot of heavy lifting. Now, what's cool about the MD3? It splits your audio signal into 3 bands and they are getting compressed separately. Let's just bypass Flatline for a second and have a look at this. There's also an inbuilt EQ that I'm not using, inbuilt expander that I'm not using, all really cool stuff, but I'm basically just using the compression. You see, compression threshold minus 13 dB. And I usually go to the point I set threshold, so I get some compression in the low end, and then sometimes just a little compression in the mids. Let's have a listen. Just like that, you see? And after the compressor, I'm hitting the output section and I've turned the limiter off because I've never really enjoyed the TC limiter. So I'm not using the limiter here. I don't like it, but I'm using the soft clipping here at minus 6 dB, which already introduces some, for me, it's kind of analog sounding smoothing of the signal. It just sounds great. And this already increases the loudness quite a bit. Let's have a listen. But what I mainly enjoy about this is that it gives the whole music some kind of density because it's compression. And I also use this to, let's say, to shape the balance between the three bands, because we got the bands here. The crossovers are at 315 hertz and at 3.15 kilohertz. And what I do a lot is I can use the ratio of the different bands to shape the balance. So for example, if I want to have more highs or more mids, then I will just push the ratio here. Let's see. Sounds ridiculous, right? But you can push it into like 8:1 or even higher, infinity, and this will just push the mids more into compression, and then you get a very natural, organic sounding, dynamic mid boost. You can do the same thing to the highs. And you see now we're also slightly introducing some compression to the highs. I like that a lot. Or you can darken your mix. So why don't we make it a little brighter? Just like Flatline 2, this plugin also has a compare mode, so you can listen to before and after without any loudness changes. The only problem is you have to do it manually, so this is a little better in Flatline. Turn it on. I think I don't even need the high-end boost here. It already sounds a little more hi-fi when it leaves this plugin. And it just sounds a little more like a record. I really like this plugin. Now let's reduce the output gain by another dB, so we really don't hit the limiter, and we can compensate that in Flatline. And now we're gonna hit Flatline, and now we need only 4 dB, but actually it's only 3 dB of gain reduction, and we have both plugins working simultaneously, and we have the possibility to shape the different frequency bands, and that for me is the best of 3 worlds kind of approach. No distortion, very punchy, and it just sounds great. 10 dB of gain reduction is a little too much, so I'm going a little too far here. But you know, for the sake of showing you how this sounds, I thought this was the right thing to do. So that is a plugin combination that I really enjoy. I either go for Flatline 2, sometimes I also go for Ozone. Ozone 8, I think, is what I'm using right now in the, what is it, IRC2 mode. That also sounds great, and I think is a similar approach to the hybrid mode in Flatline 2. But lately, I really enjoy Flatline 2 because it's so idiot-proof to use, you know? You don't have to touch anything, just bring up the channel linking a little bit. That's a matter of taste, but I usually do that, and pull down the threshold until you feel like you got the right amount of loudness. And use hybrid mode because it is superior to traditional clipping and limiting. So let's finally compare Flatline only, this one in hybrid mode, and my Kohle combo. So the MD3 plus Flatline, but Flatline only doing, what was it, 3 dB of gain reduction. So the Kohle combo definitely sounds brighter. It introduces some kind of high-end boost, which I like, and it's kind of part of my mixing, so I use that instead of an EQ. Flatline alone definitely sounds more transparent, so if that's what you want, you can simply do it with one plugin only. They both sound like equally good, like the loudness and the punch. And obviously the Kohle combo is a little more versatile because you can change a lot in here. And yeah, now it's up to you to choose what you prefer. Let me know. And please check out TC Electronics MD3. I think there's even an MD4 version now with 4 bands. It's just such a helpful tool. And I mean, I'm a finalizer guy. I always have been a finalizer guy. So that for me, that was like a natural progression to start using this plugin as well. This also sits on my drum bus. Also very cool to, to shape the balance between the bands there. Really nice plugin, very often overlooked by the younger guys, TC Electronics. Check it out. Links below to all the plugins, to Flatline, also to the band, Fragments of Unbecoming. And finally, Ermin Hamidovic, the guy behind Flatline Audio, who spent, I think, thousands of hours fine-tuning the algorithm for this plugin for Flatline 2. He's also the mastering engineer, in case you don't know him. And he worked with Periphery and Devin Townsend and Architects and bands like that and did the masters. I think he recently mastered the new Job for a Callboy album, if I'm not mistaken. So he knows what he's doing. And he did a fantastic course for my Academy Kohle Audio called a metal mastering course, I think several hours long, where he shows you how he masters a Silosis song, but he also works with let's call it not so professional sounding master sent in by one of the cultists. Check out that course. It's highly recommended. Or just become a Kohle Audio Cult member, because as you know, it includes all our courses and also Ermin's course. So what we take away is, for me at least, there's a best of 2 or even 3 worlds with that plugin combination. And please don't forget that stupid loudness is even more stupid than it used to be, because the loudness war is kind of over. Just push things to the point where they sound great, And loud can be great, but it doesn't have to. Be careful of distortion when you use clipping. Be careful of softening your mix with using limiters. I hope you could learn something and take away something from this video. And I see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Ring the bell. Ding dong. Leave a comment. Let me know how you like this video. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. I see you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye.